friends. Welcome to episode 59 of Storyteller Conclave. This is a show all about helping you run the best tabletop role-playing game that you can, whether you're a new storyteller or dungeon master learning the craft, or an experienced storyteller looking to take your game up to the next level. I'm Sarah.
I'm Rob.
How we doing, Rob?
Allergies got me.
Yeah, allergies got you. I think the wine gave me a little bit of heartburn. I've had a headache all day. I think we're just in top operating conditions
Yeah, this is
now.
clearly the week.
This is what peak performance looks like.
This is it. This is it right here. Right here. You guys can probably hear it in my voice. It's just, this morning I woke up and I was just like, God, I hope this isn't a cold. And like, I need histamine and a little bit of allergy meds. And I was like, oh, I'm doing much better. Yeah, that's great. Allergies, just what I needed today.
And then Rob's trying to grab himself a quick cup of tea to ease his voice before the show. And I'm all like, we go live in 60 seconds. He's like, okay, I guess I'm getting it later.
Yep, no worries.
So
nothing real new to report, although I will say we had a little bit of an engineering boost here. Sean was nice enough to tool us some new 3D printed mounts for our microphones, and I have to say, they turned out freaking fantastic.
Oh my god, it was amazing too.
Yeah.
Like, just, I knew he was discussing doing this, but then I look over at his screen on his computer, and he's got this, like, animated model showing how the thing screws together.
15 minutes after I asked. Like, literally, yeah. I like, hey, this is the kind of thing we need, and he's like, 15 minutes later, he's doing this live stream to me of this perfectly 3D modeled object. Came last week with a piece for it, and tried it, and it was near perfect. And here comes my cup of tea. Thank you, sweetie.
Oh my goodness! So thank you so much, Vicky. Big shout out.
Yeah, big shout out to Vicky for bringing me tea. That was fantastic. Just what I needed. And then came back this week with 2 parts that are just flawless. So, hats off to you, Heatsink. Thank you so much.
Kings to you, Monday.
That's right.
Kings to you.
Oh, nice reference. Nice reference. So, that's about it. Everything else seems to be going pretty well, and I don't know if we're going to have any problems with Patreon. I think the whole tax thing slid by us a little bit.
Yeah.
But we'll see how it's by end of month they're going to finish things off, but we'll also get a new interface, so I'll get to see if there's anything. So
yeah.
So hang in there, patrons. It may not be as bad as we think. So
well, I mean, it's only a little bit of sales tax anyway, so it wasn't going to be making a break in the bank for anybody. I don't think. All
right. That being said, we have a topic this week that started out with us kind of having one idea for it and then adding on. Which was good.
There was some really good discussion that took place on the Discord.
Totally.
It kind of came from 3 or 4 different positions, and so that's talking about personal plots.
Yeah. Not just like for your characters, but like a plot that aligns with a particular character, whether it's a character like a PC or an NPC.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's a PC, but you can absolutely do this with NPCs as well and such like that.
Yep.
But giving plot to one specific character at your table, and just kind of following that and seeing where that goes.
Yeah.
Those of you familiar with Critical Role, for the critters who listen to our show, this is one of the more famous ones was like the Briarwood arc from the first season, where they followed Percy's main story, and it was probably the most famous, most well liked arc. Collectively across the board there. But that's a great example if you're looking for an example of what a personal arc is where you've got one character's backstory comes into the story to bite them in the ass.
Yep.
The villains that they wrote in their little, this was the motivation for my character being who they are, show up.
Yep.
And now the whole party has to jump in and resolve this for them.
Yeah, and another, if you want to look toward like movie stuff that has direct arcs, no different than Mondego. And what we just brought up, it's when you drive a single character and the plot rotates around them, and again, when you look at something like that, it doesn't mean that there aren't others involved. It doesn't mean that they don't have their own little stories, but their little stories are a scene here, a small quest there, that link directly with the main plot. A good example of that is Three Musketeers and the stories of D'Artagnan.
Yeah.
Because really, they're the stories of D'Artagnan. And everyone else around them blend into those stories.
Yeah.
And people are involved in each one. So it's a good way of looking at it as well. No matter which one of the stories, it's usually just D'Artagnan that you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you make room for something like that? Like usually when you're approaching writing a plot, you're kind of doing it with a global sort of thing of like, okay, so the mega corporation is going to do this, and the player's going to have to fight against them, or the evil wizard on the hill is going to do this, and then the player's going to have to fight against him. So what do you do when you're building your whole world like that to make room for? Oh, and by the way, John the Sorcerer.
Well, I think you've got two different angles there.
Mm-hmm.
You've got what's happening in the world and the plot of the world,
mm-hmm.
which should be very gray. I mean, we've talked about this before about leaving holes. A lot of early storytellers would write stories like novels, where they fill in every little detail so they know exactly what's going on with everything.
That used to be me.
Yeah,
but then as soon as somebody did something out of the box, and it threw a monkey wrench in the whole thing because they were off script.
Exactly, and that's the thing is that when you start writing a story on rails, you already are causing yourself pain.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the best things you can do is start with a very easy concept. If you can write in 2 sentences your plot, you're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes a page and a half to explain all of the people and the intricacies, dial it back. Because you haven't even met your characters yet. You don't know what's attached to that.
Yeah.
And so if you can say, if your plot starts out with, there's an evil dictator trying to steal a powerful artifact. Perfect. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
That is the world plot that's going on. Okay, now I have players. I have a exiled prince. I have a goblin sapper, who's been, who is part of a community. I have a paladin who is trying to become, a greater paladin,
mm-hmm.
And I've got a ranger who is, who's a city ranger. He's not a forest ranger. He's basically a rogue,
mm-hmm.
Okay, how do I now fit them in? Well, the best things you can do is look at their backgrounds. Look at what information they do give you. Now, D&D gives you backgrounds right off the bat because they help you create. And so in that, you're not necessarily asking the players for anything more than that they have to create on their sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And that already starts a little line into it.
Yep.
So that's where you start notching into your story. Okay, so now you've got this villain. You've got a direction for the villain. Where do these people now fit into that life?
Yep. I think it's a really important. We've talked a lot about session zeros and about the big importance of those, and
Mm-hmm.
the importance of having that sort of open dialogue with your players.
Yep.
And I think this is really where it kind of comes to a head, is that right from the get-go.
Yep.
You've got your setting, but you want to make sure that everything kind of meshes. And so as everybody's kind of making their characters, have those discussions with your players
Mm-hmm.
about like, okay, so your character's an exiled prince. Where are they from?
Yep.
Okay, well, I don't know, just some other kingdom. Okay, well, how about if they're from this kingdom? Could I suggest that? The culture is a little bit like this.
Yep.
You might have this sort of involvement in your background. Does that sound good to you? Well, I was thinking more something like this. Oh, okay. Maybe instead we make you from this kingdom over here.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds good. Boom. Now you know that character's place in your plot, in your world, and now you can plan around them.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that if you're doing whole cloth, or even if you're doing advancement, like if you're dealing with Forgotten Realms, know Forgotten Realms, and if somebody knows it slightly better than you, and they're like, oh, I want to be, I want to be a red wizard in training of Thay. That's a pretty lofty goal for someone, considering that one of them has to die or be taken out to become a red wizard.
Yeah.
But I could see some young person doing that. Okay, so where are you from to become a red wizard? Well, I'm from this region. Okie dokie. That gives me a lot of information right there about who you are and the culture around you. Mm-hmm. Even if they say, well, that's not how I take it. I'm a very, pious person. I'm very giving. Great. Your culture is not, and you know that. Oh, yeah, they're terrible people. Good, thanks. I'm glad we have that locked down.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's also you have to remember I was married, but she died. Okay. Do what are the? I was very much involved with this woman. Okay, and we had a child, but we lost the child when she died at sea. Oh, that's tragic. Mm-hmm. And I ended up having to, give them up to my parents. Great, that's a tragic story. So it's really hurt you. Yeah. So now I'm avenging her death in this piracy. Excellent. I'm not going to use that pirate character at all, because you have a vengeance against them. You're going to be searching for them the entire time. On the other hand, I will bring up the fact that maybe your wife didn't die when she went overboard and has actually been a pirate queen. And she's been doing the same thing you're doing, and maybe one day the two of you will meet up.
Whoopsie.
Exactly. So you don't necessarily have to bite on their hook.
Uh-huh.
But if you find something in their past that works, that's great.
Right.
Likewise, you're going to have players who look at their character sheet and like, yeah, this is my background. I was in the military, and according to this, I also was a farmer. So that.
And you know what? Sometimes that's good enough.
Yep.
That's good enough. Like, not everybody needs the the huge, dark, tragic backstory that is like a small novel in and of itself. Like, honestly, some of the best characters I think I've ever written and or played have been the ones that were like, yeah, I grew up on a small farm, and my father was an adventurer back in the day, and when he died and I was old enough to leave the farm, I took his old sword from his days as the captain of the guard.
Yep.
And went to go seek my fortune.
Yep.
Period.
Yep. Done. Simple. Easy.
Father loved me.
To the
Mother
point.
loved me. I had a good upbringing. Nothing tragic. No PTSD. Just trying to follow in my father's footsteps. That's
Yep.
it.
It's very simple. Yep. And there is seriously nothing wrong with a character who is decently well adjusted and becoming an adventurer.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing wrong with that.
I mean, don't get me wrong. Like not being well adjusted lends itself to being an adventurer.
But sometimes being the straight man in a group of crazies
Oh, no.
works its own way.
Absolutely. I'm just saying is that sane people usually don't go adventuring. What was
Okay.
that? The how was it? I saw it written. Hey Bob, want to leave your wife of 6 months and successful winery to go hunt vampires with me on the countryside? Nope.
Well, it was nice talking to you. Yep. So what kind of personal plots exist? Like how do personal plots roll out?
Oh God, yeah. There's a lot of different flavors of them. So you've got a section of the main story
Okay.
that may follow an individual's background. So it does become the primary plot of the game. Like the aforementioned Briarwood arc. The entire
Is that the one about the sword?
no, it's long and involved.
Okay.
But suffice to say, the character's backstory was that his entire family, he was a noble.
Sure.
Of noble birth. His entire family was essentially betrayed and slaughtered by a rival noble family.
Oh, that sucks.
And that was what was handed to and he was basically the only one who got out alive. Like, he thinks
Okay.
his sister is still alive, but he's pretty sure like everybody else is dead.
Sure.
And that was it. That was literally, he didn't even fill in, what happened to them or anything like that.
And so from there, the storyteller built a plot that
exactly.
followed along that line.
So they show up. They at this point they've ingratiated themselves with the sovereign of the area that they're in, and these rival nobles show up as honored guests at dinner one day with the sovereign. Oh, we're welcoming the Briarwoods in from this foreign land because they're forging a trade deal with us in the from the town of Whitestone, which was Percy's hometown, that they graciously took over after tragedy and illness befell and killed the entire Derolo family.
Really? That's tragic.
Exactly, and he's sitting there going like, "What the heck is going on?"
The winners write history.
The entire party then basically says, "Percy, what's going on?" He says, "Those guys did things," and the entire party then went, "Well, they made the mistake of showing up at dinner here. We got your back.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?"
Yeah.
And that player's personal plot then becomes the main plot of the story.
Right.
The storyteller went out of his way to introduce that as the next major plot element.
Right.
Okay.
Laid it out on the table, literally.
Exactly. So it wasn't like it was pursued individually necessarily by the player.
Right, which I think falls more under like the quest design.
Yeah.
Where you've got a main plot going ahead and then someone's just like, maybe their sword starts talking to them, the relic that they received from their family. And so now that person wants to discover more about that sword, so they may lean into that, and the group may lean into that as well and say like, yeah, let's find out what's going on with this sword, because it's talking to you. Now that may run parallel in a way to the actual plot line, the main plot line, or it could be, like we all love to call a side quest, which effectively is like a mini story. It's still in the world setting. Everybody's comfortable with the world setting now, but now you're running a different plot. The main plot's kind of on pause, or maybe certain elements will come out at certain times that, like, oh, this information finally came to you. Or it's played during quote-unquote downtime.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you guys are traveling or have to get from point A to point B, and it's along the way.
Yeah.
You know? All those kinds of things fit very well into the side plots.
Some of the challenge of it may even be trying to accomplish the side plot while the main plot is issuing forward.
Very much so.
You've got certain characters who will have goals, and it may be like, well, I need to be in a certain place to accomplish this goal, and we're going to be going through a certain place, but we don't have time to really stop, because the evil wizard on the hill is not going to stop doing what he's doing, or whatever.
Right.
So now I've got to figure out a way.
Exactly.
Well, we rest at the inn for the night. I may have to take a point of exhaustion because I'm going to be out all night trying to accomplish this thing.
Right, and I think that's where really goals come in. And I think goals are important, regardless of the type of story it is to make sure that if your player has a goal, that you listen to it.
Yeah.
And that can become something that you follow and help them with in these kind of quests. And again, it could be a part of a single session, or it could span over multiple sessions.
Right,
you know?
right.
So,
like Lord Thalion, our asshole bard,
yes,
who's wants to become a shipping magnate.
Yeah, which he's working on.
And actually he's making some headway on.
I would definitely say he is. So, even though arcs, we normally think of single plots running as player arcs, it doesn't mean that it can't be an NPC that runs that same arc.
That's correct, yeah.
A good example is this, in 7th Sea, there is a general of basically the French army who was sent off to Russia to die, because basically they needed him out of the country so that he wouldn't start a coup.
Seems legit.
And so one of the plots is literally getting to him a message and then getting him back and having that kick off a revolution.
Oh, right on, okay.
So it really kind of follows him on the second half of returning him. It's for lack of a better term, it's an escort mission that follows the end of it.
Right.
And there are certain events that occur along that path that are bound to specific characters. So as you're returning, they kind of 7C gives you some options of like, these are the types of people who'd want to meet with him. There's nothing to say that your characters aren't aware of these people and that they aren't part of the guideposts to get them. Members of other nations who are like, yeah, we know what's going on in your country, and by the way, we're behind you, or we're not behind you, and you will not make it back to your country because we agree with the king there, or the emperor there, that you shouldn't make it. And things like that. So a lot of times when we look at a main storyline that follows one character, or in this case, one NPC, it doesn't mean that you can't have other PCs involved in connections. And I think connections are a point there that make that work with following an NPC kind of plot
absolutely.
line. Where at the beginning of the game you may say, hey, I'm going to say that this individual, like he's your uncle, and I'm going to just give you a little write-up about he's a connection that you have. They have no idea when that's going to come in.
Right,
until a letter shows up at their desk and they're like, oh yeah, Brennan from Avalon has sent you a letter saying that, he needs to meet with you as soon as possible in regards to something that's going on in Montaigne. You're like, well, I kind of know what's going on in Montaigne, so I'm going to reply with this. And now there's a subplot where he comes ashore, risking life and limb to get to you and to help the situation. You know, things like that can definitely make the players, just from a simple connection point, be part of the plot. And
especially when you've already established this person's family. I mean, if it's some rando NPC who's like, I need your help, you're prone to tell that person to take a hike.
Yeah,
but
and especially early on when players are making connections and they think connections are really important, and you just start rattling off names to them and sneak one in there that they're not aware is going to be evolved heavily later. Or even better, when they are aware of the world and you give them a connection and they look at you with that serious look of, in meta, I know exactly who this person is. Like you've played cards with Drizzt. Oh, I have. Oh, my character doesn't know what that means. Shit. We,
in fact, Sean's Dragon Heist Waterdeep Dragon Heist game started off kind of like that, where Volo hires you for your initial job.
Volo, nice.
And, of course, my character is this, like, naive paladin, which is, like, level 1, raised in the temple because she was a tiefling and her parents basically didn't want anything to do with her. She was this tainted little evil baby, so they gave her to the church of the sun god. And so she's like, oh yeah, this Volo guy, whoever the hell he is, he says he's an author, like that gives him some weight, Anyways, whatever.
I don't read.
Whatever, he paid well enough for the job, so he'll probably amount to nothing. But
exactly. And as I there's no rules on this either. We're not saying that you have to have a game that's wrapped around characters at the beginning, nor does it say that you have to, you can't throw them in dead center. Like, if you're rolling with your plot and something kind of catches your giddy up, there's no reason why you can't go back to your players' backgrounds and throw something in there.
Yeah, sure.
Where now it's involving them for a little while you kind of get your plot back on its feet and figure out where you're going to move with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's good sometimes to run a side quest or a character arc when you're not sure of where you're going. Like, let it follow somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let it run a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, the fate of the world doesn't always have to be at stake. You sometimes it's okay to just have like relative calm and peace in your world, at least as far as the players are concerned, and allow them time to just work on their own stuff.
Indeed.
That's one of those things that kind of bothers me about video games, like Skyrim. As much as I love the Elder Scrolls universe, everything is always like, oh, the world's gonna end if you don't insert plot point here.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do people put thousands of hours into this game, doing odd random side quests? Like, how do you reconcile that with the world will literally end if we don't solve this immediately? And yet you can play for 600 hours and the plot just doesn't move, So, yeah, sometimes it's okay to just be, not have something on the burner.
Right. I mean, we laugh when we look at the flip, where it's two dragons and a troll sitting around a table playing corporates and homelands.
Yes.
Yes. And you're like, okay, you just got home and your wife burned dinner.
Roll for initiative.
Okay. I roll for communication and use my cell phone to call for pizza. Oh shit! I rolled a 1. You broke it. It fumbled out of your hand and fell across the tile floor.
No, I didn't have insurance.
Exactly.
Knox in the box is in our live chat. And he says, I hate that because then where do you go after that? You mind clarifying that actually? Because I'd love to answer that question for you. Where do you go after what? A section of peace and downtime?
Yeah, or are you talking about when things when you're done with a character plot, like which question there get kind of come?
Or where do you go after the big end of the world plot?
That's always fun.
That might be the other thing that you mean.
Yeah, and sometimes I like the end of Princess Bride for that. So it kind of helps it. Instant world saving. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So think
where do you go after that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Look at the end of Princess Bride. Literally, the characters are like, so what are you going to do? Have you ever thought about taking up piracy?
Yeah.
That literally is another plot unfolding right there. Because you can literally say, 6 months later, well, on the ship of the dread pirate Roberts.
Yeah. The pirate ship Revenge.
A letter is received, and it's Wesley messaging you that something's wrong with the child of Buttercup.
Uh-huh.
Oh shit, well, I got to get back, And you come to find out that it was twins. So, and it's that's it, but that's not the plot. The plot is about something that's happening locally, and now,
Yeah.
Maybe they have to go save Fezzik or something.
I mean, but you do bring up an interesting point. He says, Man of Steel went right to saving the planet. Superman could have started smaller.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. And, I mean, overall with plots, I think it's great to... It's great to start small, so therefore you do have room for escalation.
Yep.
Second off, typically if your world does allow for things like heroes to exist, why are your level 3 characters the ones saving the planet?
They don't have to be.
Instead of these, mythical level 20 characters that you've got tooling around standing next to the king as his advisors.
Right.
And likewise, I think this is actually a great place where personal plots do come in to bring it back around to the main topic. Is that it roots your players. It brings them back down to earth.
Yeah.
Because you get away from the big, oh my god, high magic, dragons and fairies and extraplanar travel and whatever else you're doing, and brings it down to, Carl, those goblins killed your mom, and you've always been saying you want revenge. we've got a minute.
Yeah.
You want to go hunt some goblins?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, we're murder hoboing through this.
We're murder hoboing through this, but, like, you need some closure.
Yeah.
Let's say we go get that closure for you, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice just to have those little quests, and it gives the storyteller a breather to kind of, like, you know, de-escalate things.
The end of Disney's Three Musketeers.
Yeah.
You know, my sister will have her honor. Okay. Let's go get him. Like the entire Three Musketeers, you know, the rest of the Musketeers go rushing after this dude, you know?
Yep, absolutely.
And it's comedy into itself, but it's telling of where do you go?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the next stage after you do whatever you do?
And it brings up a good point, too, because I think when we're talking about the different types of character plots, it's important to note that throughout the life of your campaign, you're going to be mixing and matching these. You know, this isn't a pick one and deal with it situation. Right. This is this plot here might surround, you know, it might be the main plot because one of your characters handed you a nice big fat juicy plot hook and you bid on it and wham, you tied it right in your main plot and now suddenly that character is kind of the main character for that plot. Then you might roll into some downtime where you take care of some personal plot. Then you might go on to
a mystery.
Paying attention to like what happened to this other NPC over here.
Yep.
And then back into another personal plot. You know, it will ebb and flow through these.
Definitely.
And don't be afraid to do that. You know?
And I think a good ebb and flow comes out of TV programming because you can kind of get a feel for good TV shows. Where they have that, where like, yeah, Avatar wasn't every episode the Fire Nation attacking. There were so many times when they were traveling and would run into random people.
Yeah.
You know, and it was comical because it would be like, great, now we can go do this thing. And then literally out of the brush, hello there. And they would literally stare like, are you kidding me? Okay, so what is it going to be this time? You guys need food? You need money? Are you secretly bandits? My wife is pregnant. Your wife is pregnant. Of course she's pregnant. Don't tell me. You're going to Ba Sing Se. In fact, we are. Great, you can follow us through the Dragon Spire. Nobody goes through the Dragon Spire. That's the most dangerous way to go. Really? Do you have another way? Yeah, we have the secret pass. Well, shit, why didn't we know about that?
Right.
Exactly. So there's nothing to say that everything has to be world ending. There can be mysteries that are discovered about the world that then give you credence to other pieces. I mean, I'm kind of doing that in my story right now. I just finished, or I shouldn't say just, a few weeks ago, we had an episode where you guys rediscovered one of the old towers.
Yeah.
And literally at the end of it, you were all like, well, that was kind of off plot. And the answer is, yeah, it was. It was a little bit of world.
Sure.
I just paused things for a minute and gave you guys a little bit of world and then pointed you at the end of it to the next part of plot. To kind of bring it back around because I didn't want it to just be plotty, plot.
Right.
Because we just had heavy plot in the previous episode.
Sometimes you need to just take that breather.
That's
and
right.
just have some world building and just have some, you know, the world is not going to fall down around you. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So you want to talk a bit about working with your players?
Yeah,
and
I kind of threw that in.
Where to get these plots in the first place and kind of how to weave them in.
Yeah, let's start with where to do it, and then the counterpoint to that a little bit that we haven't talked about in all of this, which I had completely forgotten about, and I think is very important, but we'll get to that. So when you're looking at, once you've got your two-line, if you're opening a new game, you know, and you've got your plot, or if you're in an existing game, think about the important facts. What are the facts of your character, of those characters that you have in your game? Write their name, write down a simple facts about them. Keep it very straightforward. You don't need to rewrite their entire history out. Just the facts that you have, where they're from, what their goals are. Did they leave a blank for you? Look for a blank in there. There may be blanks. There usually are.
And if there aren't, maybe again that's a discussion to have with your player during their session 0. You know, this is I think everything we're about to talk about here goes with the understanding of this should be part of a discussion that takes place during character creation.
Yes,
you know.
As time goes on, though, and this is where you can add to that, is that there's nothing wrong with tracking your characters and knowing what they did. So you can always come back to that because there's nothing that says 26 episodes in, you know, after episode 3 where your character, that character haphazardly ignored a child urchin and sent them back to the orphanage, that kid now doesn't hate them. And there's now a vendetta plot that's running in the background.
That's a thing.
That happens. So session 0 is about creating background, but it's also about you as a storyteller understanding what's important to that character.
Yes.
And where they stick out.
So you want to establish what goals they have.
Goals are important.
Goals are very important. So, like, what does this character actually want? I mean, typically you don't just become an adventurer to just become an adventurer. Okay, I've got a sword, now what? Typically there's a goal in mind.
Yeah.
Either, and maybe that goal is something as simple as, I want to strike it rich.
Mm-hmm.
Or I want to, have fantastic adventures so that I can write about them.
Yeah, I want to have a reputation that is positive and people talk about me everywhere,
Maybe I just saw the little guy getting stepped on a little bit once too many, and I decided to take up a sword and fight for them.
Yep. And there's nothing wrong. I want to stay hidden. That's a whole nother thing. Is like my life sucked before, and I'm not that person. Mm-hmm. So I'm creating a new life for myself, and I'm leaving that one behind. Mm-hmm.
I just really hate goblins.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
So having that card, if you will, in your folio ready to pull, and say, okay, what part of this do I want to pull out and drag into a plot to fill in a hole? And it doesn't have to be a perfect fit. Remember that whenever you're doing stories about characters, there are always gaps. There are always things that your players won't be aware of and may be surprised about. For instance, if someone hands you a 2-page essay on their character that explains their entire heritage and their parentage and where everybody came from and everything's nice and clean and how they were trained and how they have this amazing weapon, which is basically their starter weapon, or whatever, and that they made it out of college, whatever this kind of, fighting school, and now they're out in the world and this person directed them to the king and everything. So they literally have it cut and dry. There is nothing that says that most of what they believe is a lie. Mm-hmm. That it is their vision of the truth. And that in truth, the grandfather is a maniacal person who is literally manipulating the entire process to make sure they got where they're going. Mm-hmm. And that the entire time that they're there's little manipulations to get them moved forward as a plot, as their own little plot to run forward.
Sure. No, I think it's also worth noting, too, that, like, just to kind of piggyback off of that, though, is that it's also important to figure out what your players' expectations are. Not only just your in-character goals, but also what does your player want out of the story. And, like, in your example there of just, making their grandfather they might hand you a story that says that their family was all wonderful and fine and upstanding and stuff like that. If their expectation is maybe like kind of a more wholesome story and such like that, if they're looking for just like to I don't know, further their family's good name or something like that, maybe think on that and not necessarily turn like, oh, by the way, your grandfather's pure evil. Like,
right.
That might be altering the expectations of the player a little bit too much.
But it comes down to the goal of the player and where they're going.
Sure.
And
but the goals of the player, I'm saying, are just as valid as the goals of the character.
Correct.
And it's just something to keep in mind.
Yep. Definitely. Don't drive them off the cliff of darkness and like, oh my God, my whole family history is a lie. No, your parents had no clue. Mm-hmm. Everything that you know is to be true. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that he wanted to put you right where you're going to be.
Right. It doesn't
and give
change
you
the
an
fact
option.
That you are a good person.
Right. Like he literally we got to this point because he wanted you to kill this guy so that you could become someone. Mm-hmm. You're like, wait a second. You planned all this? You're the one who coordinated the pirate attack? You were the one who killed these 13 people? Like, well, I had to prepare you. Life is about death. Okay, you're the villain here. This guy's just a chode. I'm putting him in jail. Well, you're supposed to murder him because he's the villain. Nobody's going to believe that I'm a villain. Mm-hmm. I just paid people money.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that twists things. So, we do have one other player type.
We have one other player type.
That we keep forgetting about.
And I'm really, really glad for the Discord.
Yep.
Because this discussion came up. And this is basically wrote this entire part of this cast for us. So, and that is the spectator player.
Yes, we talk about spectators as people who aren't playing the game, but we talked about them in a previous session, a previous episode, where it's like the wife of a friend who's actually playing because they want to be together. They're more of a spectator player. They're really not necessarily involved in the plots or anything. They want to play D&D and they want to play with their significant other, but they don't want to add anything to it. They just want to hang out and be supportive.
Or maybe they're more introverted. That's definitely a thing I've seen as well. Is you've got players who are they're okay being in a group of friends and they're okay playing a game together, but they're not okay having the spotlight shined upon them and having an entire table full of people look at them and say, "What is the decision you are making that's going to drive the entire group?" And I think that's a lot of like where you get your spectator characters as well. It's not even that they're only tangentially part of the group; they're very much part of the group.
Yeah.
But just don't hand them the spotlight. That's that's not fun for them.
No, especially if it's a new system, or it's a new table, or it's a new storyteller, or it's a whole new world style. They might not be prepared for 20 questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't want to get into the breadth and depth of their character. They just want to play the system and try and figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for that, encouragement is good, but pressure is bad.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the key.
And so a lot of this is about knowing your players and knowing which ones are your spectators, which ones are your active participants, and which ones you're going to want to avoid shining the light on, and just let them play their character, let them be a support character in the role, and just go from there.
So we have good questions, and I want to give enough
questions.
Time for these questions. So I think we've got good amount of time right now that we can probably dive into these. Where do you want to start?
I kind of want to start at the top.
Okay, go for it.
So, this comes from Knox in the Box, who is with us in the in the live chat right now. He's also saying, like, I'm just saying Knox has amnesia, but if you give him a wife and kids he doesn't know about, he's going to tie them up and burn that cottage down. I don't want them.
That's a perfect way of saying don't
shove it on
too
me.
much.
I know where the spotlight is if I want to step into it.
All right. Well, let's get into the questions then.
So stemming off of that, and this was Knox was the inspiration for the for the discussion about the spectator characters, and he came to this question here. If you have a PC that is timid or shies away from the spotlight and personalized plots, what can the DM do with this? I mean, the short answer is nothing.
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
Nope.
There is no action that is necessary there. Is that person having fun sitting at your table without the spotlight shining on them?
Yep.
Good, then you're doing things right.
Yep. Are they comfortable? Are they playing the game? Are they rolling the dice? Are they enjoying the camaraderie of people at the table? Is everyone are you making sure that they're as comfortable as possible?
Yeah.
And enjoying themselves, and that's all that matters.
We've talked before about the assumption of friendship at the table, and I think that's part of it right there, is just making sure that your players are comfortable.
Yep. Be a good host.
Yeah.
To your game, and in that, make them comfortable and let them sit. There's nothing to say that when a party happens, that everyone at that party wants to be there and having a full conversation and be part of that conversation. Some people like sitting in the back and just listening.
That's me, honestly. I like people watching. I go to parties, I sip a drink, I have a chat with a friend, and that's it.
Yep.
I'm not out on the dance floor.
Nope. It's not necessary for everybody, and you can still have a great time.
Yep.
Yep.
So Technolich asks, if you have a player that has unique requests, such as last of their species, a player-specific secret quest, etc., based on the yes and principle, what are some ways that you recommend incorporating oddball requests into your gaming group?
Honestly, I think early on as a storyteller, you're often wanting to kill requests because it adds a challenge.
Yeah.
But in truth, I think oddball requests are okay and really shouldn't change much. I think they can if it's a world-shattering kind of thing, but I think you should weigh it with where it affects your plot. Not necessarily the world, but where it affects your plot. Because honestly, if it doesn't affect the plot at all, let it happen.
Yeah, I think if it doesn't affect the plot at all, it's maybe not too oddball. But I think that the big question for me is maybe a little less about the plot and more about how much of the oddball condition is going to be soaking up the spotlight. How much of a special snowflake is this character going to need to be on a moment-to-moment basis?
And here's the thing that I say about that, and it took me a while to kind of come to this when I was reading the question and going over it in my head was, how many times have you watched a cartoon or a TV show where one of the characters is absolutely ridiculous and the whole world just doesn't give a shit?
Yeah.
Like, they just treat them like they're a normal person unless they say something that is out of context for that social environment. You know, like, yeah, it's a chicken. There's only one person who recognizes Chicken Boo, but everyone else thinks he's some hotshot star. You know, and just keeps going with that. And even when he says something ridiculous, and you know, which is just him clucking, they're all like, oh, "How could you say that about them?" You know, and it's like, wait, you understand them? Like, even that person thinks it's ridiculous. But that's the whole point: is that you don't necessarily have to make oddball. It doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It can be off. It can be tragic. But you have to listen into what the request really is. What is it about that they want? Do they want it to be something unique, and what part of it do they want to be unique?
Yeah.
You know, oh yeah, I'm going to be a bug warrior. Okay, you're fine with that? Sure. All right. So now, instead of your town being just humans, dwarves, and elves, there's also a contingent in there of bug warriors that were brought in as slaves, had their freedom like just happened 10 or 15 years ago, and everyone in town kind of gives them a weird look because that freedom was hard fought. And so people kind of look at them like, well, they're warriors, and they killed a bunch of guards and, you know, the slavers that had them, and some people were slaving them, but I wasn't the people who was enslaving them. You know, so they shouldn't be aggressive toward me. You know, but that attitude still sticks in their head.
Sure.
So it's just a little social construct that doesn't change a damn thing about the game.
Yeah.
It may change. And in RPGs, you see this all the time, that if you pick a weird race, like, you know, maybe in the Forgotten Realms, you pick a drow character. Yeah, some of the dialogue choices may change ever so slightly, but it doesn't change the plot.
Yeah.
That's it.
There's, I think though, something like that takes a level of trust with your characters, or with your players, I mean.
Definitely.
Because I've seen it happen before where somebody does have the oddball request, and the storyteller does the math on it and says, oh yeah, sure, I can say yes to that. That's not going to affect the plot any, and it ends up consuming every moment of the game. Like, you know, okay, I'm going to play a bug warrior. Okay, this shouldn't affect too much. Here, let me, you know, adjust some things in your backstory so that, boom, bug warriors now fit in my whatchamacallit. Okay, so what does the party want to do? We want to hunt goblins. I want to hunt goblins. We want to hunt goblins. Okay, bug warrior, what do you want to do? I want to go eat grass because my character eats grass. Okay, you eat some grass. Now what? Now I'm going to build a hive. Okay, I see where this is going.
This is the explosive flatulence character.
Yes.
This has nothing to do with the story. This is everything to say, okay, we just did a session 0, and you completely derailed the story by being you.
Yeah.
Are you wanting to run this game? Like, in a direction? Because that's what I'm getting the feeling. You don't want to play with the other players.
So, I think, so the question was asked based on the yes and principle. Okay, and Knox did actually ask what is the yes and principle in the live chat here. So the yes and principle is typically a rule from improv. You never say no in improv. If somebody hands you something in an improvisation, you don't say no. You say yes, and you accept it. You put it into your reality, and you build off of that. The story continues, assuming that thing is. I think, however, character creation is one of those places you can say no. Like, in gameplay, generally, as a DM, you want to not tell your characters no. You know, you don't want to be that storyteller who's like, no, you can't do that. You say, okay, that has some consequences, and then your story continues from there. That's yes and. Yes, and might be something bad, but at least you said yes.
Right.
You know, and the story continues. But I think during character creation, like, before the story really gets going, if somebody hands you an off-the-wall idea and you really just don't think that it's going to fly, you don't have to yes and that.
I think that's true for most storyteller DM-style game styles. I think that when you start moving into the combined game styles, collaborative, like City of Mist or Fate or something like that, where everyone's involved in the process, it's a group thing that will say, like, how does that fit in? Like, everybody's going to ask that question.
Yeah.
Like, where does that fit in? And now they have to explain it. And if they explain it well enough and they think it's going to work, then yeah, I think that'll be just fine. But I think it would weed itself out in those situations. So, yeah.
All right. I don't know. Do you think
Sam,
we answered the question?
I think we did.
Okay.
So Sam asks, as a DM/GM, how do you go about a situation when a player wants to incorporate a personal plot of their own into the story, but it either doesn't go with the flow or wouldn't make any sense?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've kind of had this happen. It's not quite as bad as like the oddball request, where your character just wants to go and build a hive because they're a bug and just utterly ignore that there's plot happening. But sometimes you do get those characters who are like, well, I've got a personal idea, I've got a personal agenda, and I want to go do it. And you're like, you do realize that like the dragon is going to burn down the town tomorrow, and maybe now is not the best time to go looking for your jilted lover. I get that that's something you want to do, but there is a plot, and you're in a party, and there's people depending on you. So what do you do with that?
Again, there would be definitely times when I'd be like, no, you need to stay with the group. It doesn't make sense why your character would be doing this. On other occasions, I might say why. Like we've spent 16 sessions working up to this point. Tell me why your character's moving this direction. Well, actually, I've been planning on backstabbing everyone, and so this is a way that I can, head off in this other direction. So you're leaving the group. Yeah. Okay. Don't come to next session. We're going to do a private session after that. That's literally what I would do. We're going to do a private session. You're not going to be at the next session. Well, can I show up and watch? Sure. You can show up and watch, but your character's not going to be there.
Yep.
I might give you an NPC or two to play that are guards or whatever, and that's it. And then come back to them and say, okay, we're going to run this session and everyone's going to sit here and watch you run your session so that you can work through whatever it is. And if your character's leaving the group, then you just left the group and you're gone.
Yeah.
Make a new character. But I would say anytime that you've got a player who literally wants to go counter to the plot and none of the other players want to go with them, you've got to ask that player, like, are you leaving the game? Is this character leaving the game?
Yeah.
Because that's okay.
It's fine. Sometimes characters don't have anything to do with the party anymore.
Yep. And there's absolutely nothing that doesn't say that after whatever gets done, that the group doesn't catch up with that individual. And now you can have, like, okay, well, here's what's happened in the last 3 months. Well, you've been doing this solo. You got this done, you got this done, this done. You then got robbed, and bandits came and did this, and God,
I'm having flashbacks to Final Fantasy VI, where like Shadow gets like left for dead or something like that, and you're like, no, he was one of my favorite characters, Shadow, no, and then like 3 or 4 hours later in the main plot, you go into some bar and he's just there drinking with his dog next to him, and you're like, oh, it's you, and he's like, oh, hey guys, what's up?
Yeah, I got that done. Took me like 2 days.
Yeah, God, no, narrowly made it out of that, and then washed up on shore, got taken care of by some travelers, and
Yep. I mean, 7th Second Edition has whole sections about how to handle stepping out of plot and stepping back in, and it's literally just that. It's like, just make another character roll in.
So I actually had a character or I should say a player recently. Well, player character, I guess
Sure, whatever.
Try to essentially leave the group like that as well. And that was Lord Thalian, our resident infamous asshole bard. And when I kind of asked the players, kind of out of character, like, what do your characters want to do? Where do you want to head next? There was a lot of discussion about, we should follow this plot thread or this plot thread. And Sean, who plays Thalian, was like, actually, I want to go off this direction. And I'm like, there's always going to be plot no matter where you go, but those are none of the threads that I handed you guys.
Right.
And so what I ended up doing is actually just having a chat with him.
Yeah.
In out of character, just in real life, and just said, hey, like, are you not enjoying the game? Are you not enjoying my current plot? Do you not feel like your character has a place in the plot? And the discussion that we ended up having was that, well, no, I think the plot's fine, but I also feel like there's a whole world out there that I want to go explore, and adventures I want to have, and things I want to look into. Because, like I said, we're playing the Elder Scrolls settings. We're both pretty big fans of the Elder Scrolls series. He wanted to go explore a lot of different things. Some of those were personal goals for his character. Some of those were just curiosities and whatnot.
Right.
And felt like where the plot was currently centered, that we weren't going to get there. And all that took was just that discussion and me just kind of assuring him of like, no, buddy, you're seeing just like this is the intro plot essentially.
Right.
Once you guys in like 5 or so game sessions or however long it's going to take, resolve this thing with the Poppy King. Essentially the world's going to be your oyster kind of after that. There's going to be some additional plot, but the world's going to open up a lot to you. There's going to be a moment where you guys are going to have some downtime. You can do some exploration, etc., etc. So don't feel like you need to skip out on the current plot to go explore your things. You're going to have time.
Right.
I just need your patience right now.
Yep.
And your trust in me as a storyteller that I'll allow for that.
Yep.
And that was all that took. And he was like, oh, okay, cool.
Yep.
As long as we're going to get there.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's not always about I want to sabotage the group. Sometimes it's just a simple mismanagement of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Your player wants to go one direction, doesn't feel like they're getting there fast enough.
Yeah.
Just reassure them that they'll get there.
Yeah. There's a place. There's a time for that.
There's a place and a time. Don't worry. Sit tight. We'll get there.
Yeah, but always keep in mind, like we were saying, your spectator characters are going to be there for the ride. Mm-hmm. They may still step in every once in a while and throw their own bones into a scene or into a plot, or something may drive them moment to moment, but it doesn't mean that you have to expect something dazzling from them every week or expect to bind them into some kind of plot piece. So, yeah, that would be the best takeaway I can take from that part of it, is that if you have players who are incorporating plots, help them. Make them, they obviously want to be part of it. Don't immediately just say no to everything. Read through, find the goals, see what's in there, play with them a little bit, see what you can do, see what you can sandbox up. But don't be afraid to say no if it really makes it difficult for you, and tell them that. Like, I don't know how comfortable I would be with adding that to my story. It's not that it's a bad idea for them. It's that you're just not comfortable telling that story.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's valid.
That hopefully they would understand that, because that's really the truth.
That's valid, and the storyteller's a player too.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to sound weird, but it's storytelling consent. Like, they are consenting to listen to your story as you run it. And they're hoping that you will incorporate pieces of their world that they're giving you in those pieces.
Yeah.
So it's a consensual relationship in that sense. No different than if you're doing collaborative gaming.
Yep.
Where everybody's throwing in a piece, and then we're passing that stick off between each other as we're telling the story.
Excellent point.
So next week...
no, we aren't done yet.
Oh, we got one
more?
We got
2 more questions. Knox asked 3 questions this week.
I did not see the other ones on that list.
Yeah.
Go for it.
All right, so Knox comes back with a couple more questions. Should you try a smaller scale targeted story to give a taste of what a personal plot can be, or do you let them sit back and simply be content to support the rest of the players? Oh, I think there's a follow-up on his small, like, what do you do with a spectator character, essentially? Do you think like a smaller, to kind of ease them into it? And what do you think a smaller plot like that would look like?
Well, I mean, small plots aren't necessarily... I consider a small plot something that's like a couple episodes that you can literally wrap up in like 3 or 4 scenes.
Sure, okay.
That's a small plot for me. So, you find out, the sword that you're carrying that's your family heirloom, that's not the original scabbard for it. It was stolen. And what's so big about why would they want the scabbard? Well, that's a good question. So now you have a scene where you figure out some information about that. You find out where it was lost. Now you go and retrieve said lost thing and then discover something new. That's it. You just discovered something new.
Yep.
It's not necessarily going to lead you to another plot point or anything like that, but it's done in a couple scenes effectively.
Can I borrow Appa? Why is it your turn to go on a magical field trip with Zuko? Yes.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Yes.
I think it's perfect. I think something like that might be okay.
Yeah.
It's because it's not world shaking. The stakes are very low, and I feel like a lot of the anxiety that I've seen in my more spectatory players,
right,
is that they don't want. They don't like the spotlight being on them because they don't like the anxiety of everybody else's expectations being dependent upon them.
Sure.
And so if the stakes of the plot are small, of just, hey guys, can we go get the scabbard from this place or this person? Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
Yep.
Okay, cool. You go get
Even
the
if it's
scabbard
just one or two of the characters doing it.
Yeah.
Like another good example is if you're running something like Shadowrun, and right in the middle of like a heist, maybe you're breaking into this, corporate exec's office to get his security key card that's special encrypted, that's literally will take them a month to replace. So you've got like 3 days while he doesn't notice it's there because he's on vacation, to get in and get out. And while you're there, on the wall is a piece of art that is a picture of your mother, and it's recent, and she's been dead, quote unquote, for 5 years. And you're like, I need that painting, and I need to know where he got it.
Oh.
So now you've got a data hack. So at that point in the story, you're like, is this the part of the TV show where they pause for next week? And the answer is yes. Because now the party's like, oh shit, are you going to want to do that? And now they could talk for a second and be like, are you doing this, dude? Or are we coming back here? And like,
side quest mofos.
Exactly. So you throw together a couple extra scenes in the heist that finally finishes out.
Yep.
It's those types of things that you can throw into moments like that where things can get a little more serious. Someone enters a room and now there's a conversation that has to happen, or a duel or something like that. It can just be seen. That's a small personal plot that can just evolve very quickly and move on.
I think ultimately though, to kind of fully, kind of come back and answer the whole question here, was or do you let them sit back and simply be content to support the other players? And I think the main thing is to have an out of character discussion with that player.
Yes.
And just say like, okay, so what, you've stated you're going to be uncomfortable with, the spotlight on you, or at least you have acted uncomfortable when the spotlight was on you.
Yeah.
Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yep.
What are your goals as a player? What are your goals as a character? And, do you want more of the spotlight on you? Is there something different that I could do to accommodate it for you?
Yep.
Or do you just not want that?
Yep.
And if they say no, then don't even give them the little thing,
Yep, exactly. Make sure they're comfortable with it.
Yep.
And I will say there is not much of a difference between putting the spotlight and having the character make a decision and having the spotlight show up.
Yeah.
So, for instance, D'Artagnan is a good example because the guys keep coming to restore the honor of his sister out of nowhere. And he kind of wants nothing to do with them. He doesn't want anything to do with that plot. He wished that plot would die a long time ago. And yet they keep showing up and screwing things up at different turns and things. Now, granted, in most cases it's a nuisance more than anything else, but it's not kind of directly related. Likewise, if you've got a player who's very supportive of the group and something comes up to offend them, and the other players step up to do the defense and handle the situation while they silently kind of sit in the corner. Like, no. He's part of our team. What did you say to him?
Yeah, right.
No,
you finish your beer. We've got this.
When the giant, when the giant steps up, who's part of your group, like the half troll or whatever, and literally kind of just pushes you to the back edge of the table, and he just says, "I got this," and clears out the bar of those guys, and then sits back down and is just like, "Do you want another pint?" And just ignores that the situation happened.
Right.
Sometimes that's a thing, but that's still putting that person in the light, and you have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
So
then the last follow-up question is, how do you make your players feel empowered in their smaller plots and roles? And I think the simple answer to that is celebrate their victories.
Every time. That does not mean gift them. That doesn't mean extra XP, but it could mean something as simple as when they do something like that happens and they're in it and you want to encourage them, inspiration die, or something very simple. It doesn't have to be world-shattering.
Or just let them have their victory and give them the happy ending, of that they were looking for. Everything turns out well at the end of their little plot.
Yeah. That's not a bad way to go. So,
no trixies, no back turning on it.
No. All right. So next week we're doing a revisit of our first episode.
Yes.
Worlds of Potential.
We're actually coming back around to it. Worlds of Potential, and that's choosing the right game system for the story you want to tell.
And we're gonna
so that your mechanics and your story all work together.
Exactly. You can find us on Twitter at @ST_conclave or Instagram at @ST_conclave. If you're listening to us live right now on mixlr.com/storyteller-conclave, you can go through the website or through the app. But please join us on our Discord. We would love to have you. You can find a link to our Discord in our Twitter or at off our website, which is storyteller-conclave/blueberry, BLUBRRY.net.
We want to give a big shout out to our Patreon members who support us every month, especially Knox in the Box, Sam, and Arcane Asylum. Thank you so much for all you guys do for the show. Our intro music is Beyond the Warriors by Guy Frog. You can find him at guyfrogmusic.weebly.com. And our outro music, which you're hearing now, is Only Our Footprints in the Sand by Midair Machine. You can find her at soundcloud.com/midairmachine or up at freemusicarchive.org.
We'd like to do a special thanks to Vicky and Sean. Vicky, thank you so much for bringing my tea tonight. It was wonderful and helped out. And all of our friends who make our games wonderful, and you, our listeners. We thank you so much every time you come.
We love every one of you.
Have a wonderful night.
Good night.